Hi everyone, this is Mohamed. I'm a physician from Sudan. I did my global health masters at UCSF and I will be the teaching assistant for the UCSF part of the health economic stations. So in this video we'll be covering building decision trees using Excel. As you have learned early in this course that before you start building a decision tree, you should know what are the actions you are comparing, what are the possible consequences for each of these actions, how is it going to affect health, and at what cost. So keeping these components in mind, let's review the following scenario. You developed a new drug for Alzheimer's. The drug reduces the risk of developing the disease in a healthy 65 years old from 12% to 8%. It also reduces the dialysis per person for those who develop the disease from 10 to 7 dialysis per person. The cost of patient care per year is 9,287 and the drug cost per year is 1,000. The task is to calculate the incremental cost effectiveness ratio. So here is our Excel template. Please note that in this example, we will keep the tree structure simple and feel free to use this template for the CA exercise at the end of this session. So here we have the title for our CA, which is Cost Effectiveness of Drug X for Treatment of Alzheimer's. And we start by identifying the patient population, which is healthy 65 years old. This population size doesn't affect the final cost effectiveness ratio, and we choose it to facilitate thinking about the problem. So 100 is generally an easy population size to think about, and we could also use a population size that represents a specific setting. Next, what are the possible actions? These are to give the drug to a healthy 65 years old individual or not to give it. And we call this node marked with a square here the decision node. So let's start by taking the no drug path. So what are the possible consequences if we don't give the drug? These are either to develop Alzheimer's or not to develop it. And we call this node identified by a circle here the chance node. So in this example, the consequences are the same in the two arms, but this is not always the case. And also we stop the tree with the presence or absence of the disease, but a more complete tree would explicitly map out all the potential clinical consequences. So in our scenario, if we don't give the drug, the chance of getting the disease is 12%. So we type 0.12 here, and the model will automatically set the other cell to 0.88. This path probability is the likelihood of landing at this endpoint in the tree. And for a simple tree with only one chance node following the decision, the path probability would be the value of that chance node, which is 0.12 in this example. But for a tree with multiple chance nodes, a little multiplication would be involved. So also note that for each decision arm, as a programming check, we calculate the sum of the path probabilities. And this must sum to 1 exactly if we have set up the tree correctly. So our population is set to at 100 individuals, and we have a 0.12 chance of developing the disease. So that means the number in path of no drug and developing the disease is 12. And the same logic goes for the other pathway under no drug as well as for the two arms under drug. So 8%, 0.8, and 8. So now that we have all the possible actions and consequences, let's move on to the outcomes. There are health outcomes and cost outcomes. And please note that we will be ignoring discounting for this tree. So in this scenario, we have provided the expected dialysis from Alzheimer's in each arm, But sometimes you will have the mortality and morbidity data, including disability rates, and you will have to calculate the DALYs yourself. So if you are interested in calculating DALYs, we have DALY calculation sheets that we can provide to you. So first, we start by giving those who don't get Alzheimer's 0 DALYs. The disease has 10 DALYs per person if no drug, so we write 10 in this cell. And if the disease occurs after giving the drug, it has 7 DALYs, maybe because the disease is now less severe and so has lower disability rate, or maybe the patient do live longer after receiving this drug. We don't know. So the total DALYs for not giving the drug are 120, which is 10 DALYs times 12% of a population of 100. And the total DALYs when giving the drug are 56, which is 7 DALYs multiplied by 8 individuals. So the difference between these two is 64 DALYs, and this is the health effect of this drug. In other terms, reducing disease burden by 0.64 DALYs per person taking the drug for 15 years, if you are assuming a life expectancy of 80 years. Now let's look at the cost. From the scenario, the cost of patient care per year was 9,287. But remember, they are going to have the disease for the rest of their lives. So if we assume a life expectancy of 80, we should multiply this number by 15. And it applies for the two pathways of developing the disease. But we should note here that some interventions might not prevent the disease development, but it will affect the cost in many possible ways, maybe by reducing the complications or by reducing the number of hospital visits per year. So for this example, let's assume that it will reduce the annual cost by 20%. So we multiply this number by 80%. The final step is to add the cost of the drug to the model. So we'll put 1,000 in these two cells of those who receive the drug. But again, remember that we have the annual cost and we need the cost over the lifetime. So assuming a life expectancy of 80 and we have a population of 65 years old, we will multiply the cost by 15. And this final column here is just multiplying the total cost on a given pathway by the number of individuals in that pathway. And here is your ICER, 11 thousandths per DALY averted. And remember that if you are using DALYs, we avert disease disability and we add health. So per DALY averted and per QALYs gained. As you know, we don't report dominant or dominated results, so if an intervention makes you spend less and gives you better outcomes, it's a no-brainer that you should adopt it. So, and on the other hand, you will not spend more money to get worse outcomes. Second, how to use the ICER. Generally speaking, if a decision maker has a willingness to pay or a WTP value, it could be used. Otherwise, there are some thresholds adopted with controversies around it, and the most famous one uses the ICER value and the country's annual per capita gross domestic product, or GDP. And it simply describes an intervention as cost-effective if it costs less than 3 times the local annual per capita GDP. And if it costs less than 1 time per capita GDP, it's described as very cost-effective or extremely cost-effective. Finally, although the use of ICER help in healthcare cost containment while minimizing the adverse health outcomes, there are many controversies in using the ICER as a decision-making tool. This term rationing in healthcare will be discussed later in the ethics and resource allocation session. So that's it for building decision trees. I hope you enjoyed this video and thank you very much.